In the bustling heart of a metropolis, a story of transformation was about to unfold. A shabbily dressed elderly man helped change a flat tire for a woman who had earlier that day dismissed him mockingly. The next day, that same woman would stand in stunned silence as she watched a private jet land for the very man she had judged so harshly. Jennifer Parker was known throughout Silicon Alley as the iron-fisted leader of one of the city's most promising tech companies. Her reputation as a skilled professional was matched only by her demanding management style. It was a double-edged sword. The very thing that drove her success also made it challenging to keep her team's spirits high. The August heat pressed against the windows of the downtown office building's conference room, where the air conditioning fought a losing battle against the summer sun. Jennifer sat at the head of the massive mahogany table, her MacBook Pro casting a blue glow on her determined face. The project she was about to present had consumed months of her team's lives. As you all know, Jennifer began, her voice carrying the weight of authority, we're in the final phase of our inventory automation project. She clicked to the first slide, displaying a detailed timeline that stretched across the screen. Let's discuss your individual responsibilities and completion plans. Aaron, start us off with your update. Aaron cleared his throat nervously, his hands fidgeting with his pen. Well, Jennifer, we've encountered some challenges, and there might be a slight delay in. Jennifer cut him off mid-sentence, her frustration evident in her sharp tone. Aaron, slight is far too vague. I need specific dates and solutions. This project cannot fall behind schedule. Your team has consistently been our timeline's wild card. What exactly is going on? Flustered, Aaron straightened in his chair. Yes, Jennifer. The team is working additional shifts to resolve the issues. We estimate we can solve the integration problems within 2 weeks. Jennifer scribbled something in her leather-bound notebook, her lips pressed into a thin line. 2 weeks is unacceptable, Aaron. We need this resolved sooner. The meeting continued with Jennifer alternating between approval and criticism, maintaining her demanding tone throughout. Her leadership skills were undeniable as she guided her team through technical complexities with an iron will. Yet her quick, unilateral decisions left little room for her subordinates to explain or learn from their mistakes. As the meeting dispersed, Jennifer remained seated, reviewing her notes in the emptying conference room. The effectiveness of her business style was proven, but a small voice in her head wondered if she needed to find more flexibility in her approach. Am I too harsh, or is this what it takes to prevent failure? She wondered. Later that afternoon, Jennifer found herself at her favorite coffee shop in downtown, waiting for her friend Bridget. The familiar aroma of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air as she wrapped her hands around a warm cup of artisanal brew. When Bridget arrived, their laughter echoed through the sophisticated cafe space. You won't believe what happened, Jennifer began excitedly. I was talking to someone from marketing, and they had the nerve to tell me our market strategy was too aggressive. But this is business, not a friendship circle. Bridget smiled gently, her voice carrying the wisdom of years of friendship. Jennifer, honey, not everyone thinks like us. Some people prefer a softer approach. Not everyone has your confidence or your style. Jennifer frowned, her initial enthusiasm giving way to serious contemplation. Softer? That's just another word for inefficient. Why be here if you're not giving it your all? Bridget reached across the table, patting Jennifer's arm reassuringly. Maybe he's just finding his way. Time has a way of sorting these things out. Besides, different perspectives often lead to fresh ideas, don't they? Jennifer gazed thoughtfully at her friend. Maybe you're right, Bridget. But in today's business climate, time is luxury we can't afford. We need results, and fast. People who can't keep up really should reconsider their career choices. Despite her confident words, Bridget's perspective had planted a seed of doubt. As Jennifer stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, she watched the steady stream of people passing by the cafe window, each face telling its own story of triumph or struggle in the city that never sleeps. Across the table, Bridget watched Jennifer with a mixture of curiosity and caution, well aware of her friend's strong opinions about success and failure. "Bridget, look at that man over there," Jennifer whispered, discreetly pointing to a shabby-looking elderly man who was shuffling along the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue. "You can tell by his appearance that he hasn't made much of his life. Just look at those completely worn out, outdated clothes. This is what happens when you don't work hard enough when you're young." Ever the compassionate voice of reason, Bridget carefully intervened. "Jennifer, we shouldn't judge people by their appearance. We know nothing about his struggles or experiences." Jennifer let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Bridget, sometimes reality is very simple. His clothes, his way of walking. They all tell the story of where he is in life. If he had worked hard enough, he wouldn't be in this situation. Don't you think? Life isn't always fair, Jennifer. Circumstances can be cruel to people. He might have faced hardships we can't even imagine," Bridget responded, trying to soften her friend's hasty judgment. Jennifer shook her head stubbornly. "Bridget, if life were easy, we wouldn't call it a struggle. People need to fight to move forward." Dressing like that, she paused, glanced again at the elderly man and said, "It's practically a sign of surrender. This is what happens when you don't fight hard enough." Bridget looked at the elderly man, who was now sitting on a bench near a park. His tired face seemed to hold untold stories of a life lived. "It's not that simple, Jennifer. What if he did try his best and things still didn't work out? Not everyone gets the same opportunities in life." Jennifer wore a distant smile. "Bridget, sometimes the truth is harsh. In this competitive world, those who can't keep up get left behind. That's just life." As Jennifer and Bridget continued their debate about life and success, George, the elderly man Jennifer had pointed out, sat nearby on the worn wooden bench. He was visibly weary from walking and the weight of his years. George wore simple, faded clothes and scuffed shoes that made him look like a homeless person. His gray hair was unkempt, and his untrimmed beard added to his disheveled appearance. Yet despite his humble appearance, his eyes maintained a lively sparkle that contrasted sharply with his tired demeanor. As George rested, watching pigeons pecking at crumbs near his feet, he became aware that Jennifer and Bridget's conversation was about him. The occasional laughter and glances in his direction made it clear he was the subject of their discussion. This wasn't unusual for George. For years, he had faced contemptuous looks and assumptions from strangers because of his unkempt appearance. He knew his clothing and posture didn't reflect the truth of his experience-rich, sacrificial life. George felt a twinge of sadness, recognizing how people judge by appearances without knowing the truth. He sat there quietly, maintaining a serene expression while masking the waves of emotion their conversation stirred within him. As he listened to Jennifer's words, George reflected on the difficult decisions and personal sacrifices he had made throughout his life. Yet he felt no bitterness toward Jennifer. Instead, he felt a kind of sympathy for her and others like her who hadn't yet learned that a person's essence couldn't be judged by mere appearances. George knew that each person he encountered had their own struggles and stories, and that respect and understanding were the true keys to human connection. Later, George headed home, inserting his key into the rusted lock of his modest apartment building in the Lower East Side. The familiar sound of the turning key brought its usual comfort. Entering the small space, he was surrounded by the simplicity of his life. He left the back door slightly ajar, allowing the last rays of sunset to illuminate the sparse interior. The furniture was minimal and well-worn, a small wooden table with 2 chairs, a faded patterned sofa, and bookshelves filled with volumes and mementos from more active times. As soon as George closed the door of his Lower East Side apartment, he headed to his tiny kitchen to brew a strong cup of coffee. While waiting for the water to boil, his thoughts wandered back to Jennifer's conversation at the cafe. Her words echoed in his mind, not because they had hurt him, but because they reminded him how deceiving appearances could be. They see an old man in worn-out clothes and imagine the worst, he mused, stirring his freshly brewed coffee. If only they knew the truth. George settled into his favorite armchair, which creaked under his weight but remained comfortable enough for contemplation. Right at this moment, somewhere out there, someone is being saved because of our work, he whispered to himself. He reflected on years of operations that most people couldn't imagine and even fewer knew about. They can't see the scars hidden beneath these clothes, the sleepless nights, the dangers we faced. It was a life of sacrifice chosen not for glory, but to make a real difference. People pass me by either laughing or looking away, never knowing who I really am. George contemplated this irony with a wistful smile. But if it saves lives, who cares about appearances? He spoke aloud, as if convincing both himself and the universe. Finally, he walked to the window, watching the bustling New York street below. People hurried past his building, never looking back, each absorbed in their own world. This is how it should be, he thought. Great things can be done from the shadows, in silence. With these thoughts, he prepared for another night's rest. George's life was a series of unsung achievements, invisible to most but deeply meaningful to the few who knew their true worth. The next evening found Jennifer working late at her Manhattan office. The floor was quiet, most of her colleagues having left hours ago. Her eyes were fixed on the monitor's glow as her fingers danced across the keyboard, reorganizing a project due the next morning. She paused momentarily, massaging her temples while staring at the spreadsheet on her screen. If I align these milestones with our quarterly targets, we might be able to launch 2 weeks ahead of schedule, she muttered to herself. Her voice carried a note of satisfaction at the possibility of exceeding her superiors' expectations. Jennifer knew this kind of dedication would advance her career, and she was prepared to sacrifice rest and leisure time to achieve her goals. Her phone buzzed on the desk, interrupting her train of thought. It was her friend calling. Jennifer answered with slight irritation in her voice. Bridget? Yes, I'm still at the office. I know it's late, but... She tried to sound casual. Jennifer, you need to take care of your health, Bridget gently admonished. Once in a while is fine, but don't make this a habit. You need balance in your life. Jennifer gazed out at the darkness, sighing. I know, Bridget. But this is really important. It's not just about the project, it's about proving I deserve to be here. The conversation made Jennifer reflect on what she was sacrificing in her pursuit of success. She looked around at the empty chairs surrounding her, considering how disconnected she was from simpler life experiences. Maybe I really am. She thought, feeling her heart grow heavy with realization. After hanging up, Jennifer walked to the window, watching the flickering lights below while thinking about George, the elderly man she had referenced the day before. He's probably never experienced this, Jennifer thought to herself. Never felt the pressure to prove his worth. She returned to her desk, gradually forming new perspectives. The clicking of her keyboard filled the silence as she couldn't help but contemplate the contrast between their lives. I won't end up like him, she thought, as fear crept into her conviction. The image of the old man in worn clothes with his tired expression became a symbol of everything she desperately wanted to avoid. If I don't work hard enough, I might end up alone and forgotten like him. Jennifer reflected, seeing her face illuminated by the bluish light of her computer in the dark Manhattan office. I need to do everything possible now to secure my future. This thought doubled her efforts, and she began typing even faster, as if each keystroke would take her further from a life like George's. These thoughts weighed heavily on Jennifer's mind as she reviewed graphs and reports. The ambition that had always driven her now carried undertones of desperation, her fear becoming apparent. As one of the youngest managers in the company, Jennifer felt a heavy responsibility not only to her colleagues and superiors but primarily to herself. "I have to succeed at this," she insisted. Yet she constantly questioned whether her personal sacrifices were worth it. "I just want to do everything perfectly, to prove I'm capable," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't want to be someone who failed in life, who never accomplished anything, like that man." Later that night, George opened an old wooden wardrobe in the corner of his room. Inside hung a collection of worn and faded clothes. Each garment had a story, every frayed thread representing memories of past missions. He carefully selected a set he had used many times before. The torn pants and stained shirt gave him the appearance of a man forgotten by fortune and time. As he dressed, George contemplated the mission ahead. "Attention to detail is crucial," he muttered to himself, adjusting his shirt to look more disheveled. He knew his disguise could mean the difference between success and failure. This city was unforgiving to the careless, and he needed to blend in perfectly. Looking into the cracked mirror hanging beside the wardrobe, he saw the reflection of a humble man marked by fatigue and despair. George felt the weight of that gaze. It was a constant reminder of the lives depending on his abilities. "This isn't just a disguise. It's an armor," he thought. Every venture into the streets carried risks. The dangers came not only from those involved in the crimes he was trying to expose, but also from the indifference of passers-by who wouldn't give a man like him a second glance. George sat down briefly, taking a short rest before departure. He thought about the young people he might save, and the families who might sleep more soundly because of his fight. "I'll get this done," he assured himself, determination flickering in his tired eyes. Finally, he picked up a small bag containing the few tools he needed. It was inconspicuous but sufficient for what needed to be done. He closed his apartment door, feeling the gravity of his mission with each step toward the dark streets. Meanwhile, Jennifer finished her long workday and left the office exhausted. She got into her car, desperately wanting to get home and rest. However, fate had other plans. While driving down the dimly lit street, her car suddenly pulled to one side, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of a flat tire. Sighing, she pulled over to the shoulder, turned on her hazard lights, and got out to assess the damage. The front tire was completely flat. Of all days, she muttered against the cold night air, checking her watch and weighing her options. Being stranded on Fifth Avenue couldn't have happened at a worse time, and there was no way she could change the tire by herself. Just then, George noticed her situation and cautiously approached. "Would you like some help?" he asked, keeping his voice as friendly and unthreatening as possible. Jennifer turned at the unfamiliar voice, her heart racing when she saw George. She felt instantly wary. He looked worn down by life, dressed in tattered clothes, his bearing telling of many years and many stories. "I don't know what to." She started, unsure whether accepting help from a stranger in this situation was the right thing to do. George sensed her hesitation and offered a reassuring smile. "I understand," he said gently. "But I have experience changing tires, and I think I can help. Don't worry, it's not too complicated. Just need a jack and a lug wrench." After a brief hesitation, Jennifer concluded she really did need the help. "All right," she conceded, opening her trunk and handing him the necessary tools. While George worked on the tire, Jennifer watched carefully. She was surprised by his dexterity, observing how he skillfully operated the jack and efficiently changed the tire despite his disheveled appearance. You really do have experience with this, she commented, reluctant admiration in her voice. Oh, well, George replied with a modest smile. It's good to know a little bit of everything. You never know when it might come in handy. When the tire was changed, Jennifer stared at George. Her face showed a mixture of surprise and uncomfortable recognition of her own prejudice. Thank you for helping me, she began, her trembling voice revealing more than she intended. I don't know what I would have done without you. George nodded with a humble, understanding smile. No need for thanks, miss. We all help each other out sometimes, don't we? He wiped his oil-stained hands with a cloth from his pocket, maintaining a respectful distance, aware of the discomfort his appearance might cause. Jennifer nodded, crossing her arms against her chest. Now that the car was drivable again, she felt the night's chill more acutely. Yes, that's true. It's just that someone like you. She started then stopped, biting her lip, aware of how insensitive her words would sound. George noticed her hesitation and took a step back, tilting his head. Someone like me, dressed like this, looking like this, he said, not with bitterness but with accepting resignation. I understand. Often our appearances tell stories that aren't quite true. Jennifer felt her chest tighten at his words. It was clear he had experienced this kind of judgment many times before. Yes. I'm sorry if that sounded rude. I've never had a stranger help me like this before. I really am grateful. George smiled again, this time with a gentle sparkle in his eyes that made Jennifer feel even more ashamed of her prejudices. It's quite all right. I'm glad I could help. Who knows, maybe someday the roles will be reversed, and you'll be the one helping me. Jennifer nodded, deeply contemplating this encounter and her previous ways of thinking. Yes, you're right. Please take care, she said as her final goodbye, before getting into her car. George's figure in her rearview mirror stayed etched in her mind as she drove away. The next morning found Jennifer with her friend Bridget at their favorite Manhattan diner. The soft dawn light couldn't quite dispel the lingering tension from the previous night's events. Bridget noticed Jennifer's unsettled demeanor and tried to start a conversation to ease her mind. You seem down today, Bridget observed. Did something happen? Jennifer gave Bridget a quick glance before returning her attention to the busy street outside. Well, I had a bit of trouble on my way home last night, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I got a flat tire, and then that man we saw at the cafe approached me. Bridget's eyes widened with surprise and concern. Oh my goodness, Jennifer. Were you all right? How did you handle it? You must have been terrified being stranded alone. I was scared, Jennifer admitted, her voice revealing a hint of the fear she had felt. But something unexpected happened. He helped me, and he changed the tires so smoothly. Like he'd done it 100 times before, Jennifer explained, smiling as she remembered the stranger's efficiency. It only took a few minutes. Bridget remembered the man and recalled what Jennifer had said about him at the cafe. Was it really the same man? An uncomfortable silence fell between them as they both remembered Jennifer's earlier comments. That's quite something, Jennifer. Sometimes life creates these situations to teach us important lessons, Bridget said, trying to offer a different perspective. Like not judging people by their appearances. Yes, well, don't make too much of it, Jennifer responded somewhat defensively. Just because he helped change a tire doesn't mean my whole perspective has to change. Just because he helped doesn't mean he isn't exactly who he appears to be. Bridget noticed Jennifer's internal struggle. I understand. But isn't it interesting to think that people might have surprising sides to them that we don't see? Maybe you're right, Jennifer reluctantly admitted, unwilling to acknowledge the significant shift in her perspective. But first impressions are usually right. This could just be an exception. As they drove to JFK Airport for Bridget's business trip, they continued their conversation in Jennifer's car. While Bridget pondered the complexities of human judgment, Jennifer maintained her skeptical stance. After arriving at the airport and watching Bridget hurry to catch her flight, Jennifer headed toward the exit. Her mind was occupied not only with their discussion about judging appearances, but also with the relentless pressure of her work. To avoid the rush hour traffic, Jennifer decided to grab a coffee at the airport cafe. While standing in line, she absently watched the hurrying passengers and flight information screens. Suddenly, through the large window overlooking the tarmac, she froze at the sight before her. There was George, the same man who had changed her tire, the man she had seen multiple times in shabby clothes, wearing an impeccable suit and tie, walking confidently toward a private jet. A wave of disbelief and confusion washed over Jennifer. She found herself moving closer to the window. It can't be him. Why? How? Jennifer muttered to herself, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. George appeared to belong to a world of luxury, completely different from his street persona. He was surrounded by well-dressed people, engaging in animated conversation as they walked toward the jet. Jennifer felt a mixture of amazement and indignation as she realized how thoroughly she had been deceived by his appearance. Is he an actor? A businessman? Or something else? The thoughts swirled in her mind. She wondered if their roadside encounter had been staged, a calculated performance. Her confusion turned to burning curiosity. Who was George, really? As Jennifer drove home, she remained puzzled by the scene she had witnessed at JFK. How can one person be such a contradiction, she wondered, searching for explanations. The Metropolis skyline passed by in a blur as she tried to piece together this strange reality. Arriving home, Jennifer pulled into her garage with a deep sigh and entered her Upper East Side apartment, still bewildered. Hoping to clear her head, she turned on the TV, expecting the programs to help her relax. Instead, what she saw only intensified the whirlwind of emotions she was feeling. A special news report was playing, and to her astonishment, there was George again. This time, he was being hailed as a hero. The reporter explained that George, an undercover agent, had played a crucial role in a covert operation targeting a child exploitation ring. Jennifer watched transfixed as George received a medal and shook hands with other officials. This man, often scorned for his appearance, has worked tirelessly in high-risk operations to protect society's most vulnerable, the reporter explained. Jennifer felt waves of shame and admiration wash over her. All her assumptions about George had been wrong. He wasn't just a common man disguised as a beggar, he was a true hero. She sank into her sofa, trying to process this information. I completely misjudged him, she whispered to herself. She reflected on the times she had seen him on the street, now ashamed of how she had ignored his struggles. The TV report detailed various operations where George had risked his life, infiltrating criminal networks to save others. George sat before the local news station's cameras. The host introduced him with respect and admiration, announcing this as a special program about an unsung hero in their community. Good evening, George began, speaking directly to the camera with steady composure despite the live broadcast. I imagine many of you are seeing the real me for the first time. My true identity and work have been secret until recently. He paused, carefully choosing his words. For years, I've disguised myself as a homeless person on the streets. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was necessary to access places most people wouldn't go, to protect society's most vulnerable members, our children. George continued, his eyes shining with passion for his mission. In this disguise, I often faced prejudice, George continued in his television interview. People judged me by my appearance, never imagining that each threadbare piece of clothing, every cold night spent on the streets, was part of a larger operation to infiltrate and dismantle criminal networks exploiting children. When the host asked how he dealt with such judgments, George replied thoughtfully. "It wasn't easy," he admitted, his eyes reflecting countless difficult nights. "Every contemptuous look, every insulting word actually reinforced the importance of my work. Those judgments meant my disguise was working effectively." George paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "And when the mission succeeded, when children were rescued, all the hardships during the operation became worthwhile." As the studio lights brightened again, George sat up straighter, preparing to share episodes about the challenges and prejudices he faced during his undercover work. The host listened intently, encouraging him to talk about the relationships that deeply affected his journey. "One incident stands out particularly," George began, his expression becoming contemplative. "It happened at a small cafe in a metropolis. I was in my usual disguise, trying to stay inconspicuous while observing the surroundings. Two young women were sitting nearby, talking." He paused, clearly recalling the scene. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their conversation carried. One woman was particularly vocal in her criticism of me. Her friend seemed uncomfortable with the comments but didn't say much. By an incredible coincidence," George continued, "I encountered that same woman the next day. Her car had a flat tire, and she was clearly in distress. I approached to offer help. At first, she hesitated when she saw me. Perhaps she felt ashamed of her earlier comments, or maybe she still distrusted me." George cast his eyes down momentarily before continuing. "But she clearly needed help, and I couldn't just walk by. She accepted my assistance, though I could still sense her wariness," he recalled. A slight sadness crossed his face as he added, "That single incident probably wasn't enough to change her prejudices. She still seemed tense, uncertain how to handle the situation." Looking directly into the camera, capturing the viewer's attention, he reflected, "This experience taught me much about human nature. It showed how deeply rooted prejudices can be, while reinforcing the importance of doing good regardless of how others perceive you." George concluded by noting that even when it's difficult, each small act of kindness plants a seed of change, even if the results aren't immediately visible. Back in her apartment, Jennifer watched George's interview, confronting an uncomfortable truth. For the first time, she saw herself through someone else's eyes and realized she had been one of those who had prejudged and dismissed him. Sitting on her sofa, the remote control falling into her lap, she pondered George's words. "What an insensitive person I've been," she questioned herself. She regretted treating him as less than human, especially now knowing he had saved countless children's lives. Jennifer spoke her regret aloud, as if voicing it might somehow lighten the weight of her guilt. The silence in her apartment seemed to amplify the gravity of her self-reflection. She stood up and began pacing, trying to process her awakened emotions. Looking toward the now dark TV screen, Jennifer felt an urgent need for change. "This isn't right. I have to change," she whispered to herself. George's interview had not only made her recognize her past mistakes, but also awakened a determination to do better in the future. Though she knew changing deep-seated prejudices and automatic responses wouldn't be easy, recognizing these flaws was an important first step. After the interview, Jennifer researched George and learned he worked at the local police precinct, involved not only in undercover operations but also in community programs. She decided to meet him. When Jennifer arrived at the police station, she felt intensely nervous. It was her first time there, and the solemn atmosphere and passing officers in their formal demeanor only heightened her anxiety. At the front desk, an officer asked about her business. "I'd like to see Officer George," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's a personal matter." Noting the seriousness in Jennifer's tone, the officer nodded and asked her to wait while he fetched George. Sitting on a bench in the waiting area, Jennifer mentally rehearsed what she would say, searching for words that could properly convey her heartfelt remorse. Minutes later, George appeared, clearly surprised to see Jennifer there. "Jennifer, this is unexpected. What brings you here?" His expression was cautious but not hostile, which gave Jennifer a small measure of relief. "George, I came to apologize," Jennifer began, looking directly into his eyes. "What I said, and my attitude when we met, was completely wrong. I saw your interview last night and was shocked. It made me realize how unfair and prejudiced I had been." George listened in silence, his neutral expression making it impossible for Jennifer to read his thoughts. After she finished speaking, there was a moment's pause before he responded. "Jennifer, I accept your apology. Thank you for having the courage to come here and acknowledge this. It's not an easy thing to do. I appreciate your desire to change." Jennifer felt a wave of relief at his words, though she knew this was just the beginning of a long journey of learning and personal transformation. "I really want to change, George. If there's any way I can support your work, please let me know." George smiled slightly, a sign that the ice between them was beginning to thaw. "I think we've already made a good start with this conversation. Let's continue to build understanding and find our way forward together." Jennifer left the police station feeling lighter than when she had entered. This was the beginning of a new chapter for her. Back at her Upper East Side apartment, Jennifer stared at the phone on her desk. She wanted to share her conversation with George with Bridget. Taking a deep breath, she picked up the receiver and dialed Bridget's number. Bridget answered almost immediately, her voice full of energy. "Jennifer, how are you?" "Hi Bridget. I need to talk. Can we meet today?" "I have so much to tell you," Jennifer said, her voice mixing anxiety and relief at finally being able to share everything. "Of course we can. But are you okay?" "You sound serious," Bridget replied, concern evident in her voice. "Maybe I am. I'll explain everything in person. Can we meet at our usual cafe in an hour?" Jennifer suggested, eager to share her experience and hear Bridget's perspective. "All right, see you then," Bridget said before hanging up. An hour later, Jennifer and Bridget sat across from each other at their regular table in the cafe. The place was quiet, with only a few scattered customers. Perfect for an intimate conversation. "Bridget, so much has happened," Jennifer began after taking a sip of her coffee. "Remember the man who helped me with the flat tire? After you boarded your flight, I witnessed something incredible. I saw him boarding a private jet at the airport. Then he was on TV, receiving an award. He's an undercover agent, Bridget, involved in crucial operations." Jennifer paused, took a deep breath, then continued. "Today, I went to see him and apologized for what I'd said and for judging him based on appearances." Bridget looked at Jennifer with a mixture of surprise and admiration, tilting her head with curiosity and slight concern. "Well, that's quite something. It must have been difficult to change such long-held views and open your heart like that?" Jennifer took another sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. "It was really difficult, Bridget," Jennifer began, her voice trembling with emotion. Each step toward him, starting that conversation, it felt so heavy. But when I started talking and saw the surprise and understanding in his eyes, I knew I'd done the right thing." She sighed, her expression mixing relief with regret. "He was incredibly gracious, accepting my apology without hesitation. It made me really think about how I've been judging people based on nothing but my own assumptions and prejudices." Bridget nodded, encouraging her to continue. "And how do you feel now?" "Honestly, I feel somewhat lighter," Jennifer replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "But I also feel embarrassed about how blind I've been. It really makes me think about the things I've said and done over the years. The two friends delved into a deep discussion about their experiences and worldviews. Bridget listened carefully, sharing her own experiences and asking questions that helped Jennifer explore her self-reflection further. Thank you for coming, Bridget. I really needed to talk to you about this, Jennifer said with heartfelt gratitude. She was thankful to have someone to share these confusing thoughts with. Bridget smiled, gently taking Jennifer's hand. You can always talk to me, Jennifer. We'll get through this together. We support each other, learn, and grow together. As they left the cafe, both women felt their friendship had gained new vitality. Back home, Jennifer sat at her desk in the corner of her Upper East Side apartment. This space had always symbolized her endless hours of work and absolute dedication to her career. The walls were covered with awards and certificates, proof of her success, but also reminders of exhausting days. But that night, as she looked around, something felt different inside her. Taking up a pen and notepad, she reflected on how her view of the world had recently changed. George's words and her enlightening conversation with Bridget had resonated deeply, affecting not only how she saw others, but also how she lived her own life. Maybe there's more to life than working yourself to exhaustion, Jennifer thought, feeling a strange but welcome lightness in acknowledging this. She began listing things she knew were important but had neglected: time with friends and family, hobbies she'd wanted to explore, moments for rest and reflection. With each item she added to the list, Jennifer felt like she was giving herself permission to live a life she'd long thought impossible. As the clock struck midnight, she finally put down her pen. Looking at the completed list, each word felt like a promise toward a more balanced, authentic life. No more sacrificing everything for work. It's time to live my own life, she said aloud. The next day, Jennifer began making small changes. She reduced her working hours, delegated tasks she'd previously insisted on handling alone, and scheduled dinner with friends for the weekend. She even enrolled in the painting class she'd always wanted to take, but never had time for. As she implemented these changes, Jennifer noticed a remarkable improvement in her overall well-being. Her days became more peaceful, she felt more present, and surprisingly, her work became more productive. Though she spent less time at her desk, her efficiency didn't suffer. Instead, she made wiser decisions about how to use her time. This new approach brought a fresh sense of peace to her life. Jennifer began to understand that balancing work and personal life wasn't just possible. It was essential for happiness and health. Then she decided to take another significant step in her life: volunteering. Jennifer walked into a homeless support organization's facility. It was a warm, welcoming space she never imagined voluntarily entering. The place bustled with energy as volunteers of all ages worked together, preparing meals and organizing clothing donations. Jennifer was assigned to help in the kitchen, feeling a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. This was completely new territory for her, and it was a bit scary. As she put on an apron and washed her hands, something began to shift inside her. There was a contagious positive energy in the air, a sense of shared purpose she rarely felt in her corporate work. Well, Jennifer, I never expected to see you here. Aaron called out. Welcome to our team. Jennifer froze for a moment, hearing her name called with such surprise. Aaron's face showed genuine amazement mixed with a touch of admiration. Their last meeting had been during that tense work conference where Jennifer, under pressure and stress, had been particularly harsh with everyone, including Aaron. The words she'd used still echoed in her mind, making her shudder at the memory. Aaron, yes. I'm surprised to be here myself, Jennifer began, trying to overcome her initial discomfort. She remembered her harsh criticism during the meeting, words that now seemed so out of place in this atmosphere of generosity and cooperation. I'm trying to make some changes in my life. Trying to become a better person. Aaron smiled, his expression softening. We all have different experiences, Jennifer. It's wonderful that you've taken this step to come here. Helping people here might change how you see many things. He picked up a large pot and began showing Jennifer how to prepare the day's sauce. Let me show you how it's done. There's a special technique to cooking for large groups. As they worked side by side, Aaron patiently explained each step of the process, from choosing ingredients to adding special seasonings. Jennifer was amazed at how easily he handled what seemed like complicated tasks. She respected not only his cooking skills but also his forgiving heart and ability to teach. You know, Aaron, Jennifer said while stirring the sauce under his guidance. I never imagined feeling this fulfilled. Usually, I measure my days by the number of emails answered or problems solved, but this is different. It's so tangible and real. Aaron laughed and handed her a spoon to taste the sauce. Yes, you feel like you're part of something bigger, don't you? Every dish we prepare here carries hope and comfort for someone who really needs it. Jennifer nodded, tasting the sauce and marveling at its flavor. That's exactly it. Maybe I've been too focused on work and forgotten what really matters. They continued cooking together, talking about life, sharing laughs and personal stories. Jennifer felt increasingly comfortable, grateful for this chance to see Aaron in a different light, away from their stressful office environment. She was learning not just about cooking, but about empathy, forgiveness, and the true meaning of helping others. As time passed, Jennifer continued volunteering, finding new passion and purpose in dedicating time to others. Her relationship with Aaron evolved into a friendship based on mutual respect and continuous learning. George's influence on Jennifer's life, though indirect, was profound and transformative. Eventually, Jennifer organized a partnership between her company and the volunteer organization, providing corporate resources and support to expand services for the homeless. This initiative not only helped the organization provide more support but also gave Jennifer's colleagues opportunities to volunteer, extending George's influence even further. When the initiative celebrated its first anniversary, Jennifer was invited to speak before volunteers and supporters. She shared her journey, telling how an encounter with one man, whom many might have ignored, had completely transformed her life. George taught me an invaluable lesson about the true essence of humanity, Jennifer shared with the audience. He showed me that each of us has the power to change not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us. She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. In doing so, he inspired me not just to apologize for my mistakes, but to become part of the solution. As Jennifer concluded her speech, she looked out over the audience. Seeing their moved and hopeful expressions, she knew there was still a long and challenging road ahead, but she felt ready to face it. Inspired by George's courage and humility, she pledged to live a life of purpose, making a difference in the world not through words alone, but through concrete and sustained action. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. That will help us continue to share wonderful stories every day. Don't miss the next amazing story, which is now showing on your screen. We deeply appreciate your support. See you next time.